The blood-soaked letter trembled in Sophia Ashwood's hand as she stood frozen on her porch, the setting sun casting long shadows across the dusty main street of Redemption Creek. 5 years a widow, and now this news that the outlaw who murdered her husband had escaped the hangman's noose. Sophia crumpled the paper in her fist, her grief as fresh as the day they'd buried Thomas. The townsfolk had pitied her then, a young bride of 21 left alone to run a struggling ranch. But they'd stopped pitying her soon enough when she sold the cattle, paid off the debts, and turned the Ashwoods spread into the most profitable horse ranch in the territory. And when she'd finally begun to smile again, they'd whispered she was dishonoring Thomas's memory. Miss Sophia. Old Jeremiah hobbled up the steps, his weathered face tight with concern. Bad news from the marshal. Harris Keller escaped, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The man who gunned down Thomas is free. Jeremiah removed his hat. The Lord works in mysterious ways, Miss Sophia. Perhaps nothing. The law failed, Jeremiah. Thomas deserved better. She smoothed the letter, refolding it with deliberate care. I need to be alone now. Inside her modest home, Sophia lit a lamp and sank into Thomas's old chair. 5 years of memories washed over her: their wedding day, their dreams of a family, the midnight knock that brought news of Thomas lying dead outside the saloon, shot by a drifter over a card game. She'd survived, rebuilt, and eventually learned to laugh again. Just last month, she'd even agreed to accompany the town's new schoolteacher to the Founders' Day dance. The whispers had started immediately. She's forgetting her Thomas. No decent widow moves on so quickly. She'll scare off any decent man with that independent streak. Sophia placed the letter on the mantel beside Thomas's portrait. I'm not forgetting you, she whispered, but I can't live in the shadow of your ghost forever. The next morning dawned with a clarity that matched Sophia's resolve. She rode into town early, her blue riding skirt gathering dust as she tied her chestnut mare outside the telegraph office. The young operator's eyes widened as she dictated her message to the territorial marshal. Miss Ashwood, he stammered. Surely this is a matter for the lawman to handle. 5 years they've had, Mr. Collins. She placed coins on the counter. Send it exactly as I've written. Outside, she nearly collided with Abigail Peterson, the mayor's wife and self-appointed guardian of the town's morality. Sophia, dear. Abigail's smile didn't reach her eyes. I heard about Harris Keller. Such dreadful news. Yes, it is. We're all concerned for your welfare, of course. Abigail lowered her voice. And your state of mind. Mrs. Halloway mentioned seeing you at the milliner's ordering a new dress, something colorful. Sophia straightened her shoulders. I didn't realize my wardrobe required town approval, Abigail. It's just that, well, with Thomas gone, 5 years gone, Sophia interjected. Yes, but a widow's mourning is a sacred thing. And after that unfortunate display with Mr. Fletcher at the Founders' Day dance, walking around a dance floor is hardly a display. Abigail pursed her lips. People talk, Sophia. They say you're becoming forward. Then let them talk. Sophia stepped around the older woman. Good day, Abigail. The next 3 weeks passed in a flurry of activity as Sophia prepared for the arrival of a new stallion she'd purchased from a breeder in California. The magnificent Andalusian would be the cornerstone of her breeding program, representing everything she'd worked for since Thomas's death. She threw herself into preparations, expanding the stable and hiring 2 more hands to help the aging Jeremiah. When word came that the stallion would arrive on the afternoon train, Sophia dressed with care in a new burgundy riding outfit. It wasn't proper morning attire, but then, she wasn't properly mourning anymore. The train platform bustled with the usual afternoon crowd when Sophia arrived. She nodded politely to acquaintances while ignoring their curious glances at her attire. The locomotive's whistle pierced the air as it approached, belching black smoke against the azure Colorado sky. Quite the entrance you're making, a deep voice commented beside her. Sophia turned to find Sheriff Wade Miller watching her with amusement in his brown eyes. I'm here on business, Sheriff. In that dress. His smile was friendly without judgment. Not that it doesn't suit you, madam. Before she could reply, the train rolled to a stop with a screech of metal on metal. Passengers began disembarking, followed by porters with luggage. Sophia scanned the crowd for the handler who was bringing her stallion. Instead, her gaze locked on a tall figure stepping off the third car. Broad-shouldered and lean-hipped, he moved with the easy grace of a man accustomed to life in the saddle. A worn leather duster hung from wide shoulders, and a battered Stetson shaded his face until he looked up, revealing sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of a summer storm. Something about him made Sophia's breath catch something dangerous and magnetic that she hadn't felt since Thomas had first smiled at her across a church social. "Expecting someone?" Sheriff Miller asked, following her gaze. Sophia tore her eyes away. "My new stallion, shipping from California." The sheriff nodded toward the stranger. "Looks like you're not the only one with business on this train." The stranger was now speaking with the station master, who pointed in their direction. With a nod of thanks, he started toward them, his spurs jingling softly with each step. "Sheriff Miller." He called, his voice carrying a slight drawl. "That's me," the lawman answered, straightening. The stranger extended a hand. "Name's Nathan O'Malley. Marshal Harrington sent me." Sophia's pulse quickened. The territorial marshal had responded to her telegram. O'Malley. The sheriff's brow furrowed. "Can't say he mentioned sending anyone. Special deputy." Nathan produced a folded paper from inside his duster. In regard to the Harris Keller situation, Sheriff Miller's expression darkened as he read the document. "This is highly irregular. We don't need outside help tracking Keller. The marshal believes otherwise." Nathan's eyes shifted to Sophia, lingering a moment too long. "Madam," she nodded stiffly, unsettled by his scrutiny. "This is Mrs. Ashwood," Sheriff Miller said. "Sophia Ashwood, her husband was Keller's victim." "I know," Nathan said quietly. "That's why I'm here." Their gazes held, and Sophia felt an uncomfortable jolt of awareness. This man knew about her, had perhaps read her desperate telegram. The thought made her cheeks warm with something between embarrassment and indignation. A shout from the livestock car broke the moment. "Mrs. Ashwood, your stallion's giving us a bit of trouble, if you'll excuse me, gentlemen." She gathered her skirts and moved past them, grateful for the interruption. For the next hour, Sophia focused on calming her new acquisition and arranging transportation to her ranch. The magnificent black stallion, aptly named Midnight Commander, was even more impressive than the breeder had described. 17 hands of pure power and spirit. Getting him loaded into a temporary stall on a wagon required all her concentration, and she was grateful to forget the unsettling deputy's arrival. It wasn't until they were ready to depart that she noticed Nathan O'Malley leaning against a hitching post, watching her work. Beside him stood a magnificent dapple gray gelding with the lean build of a quarter horse. "Fine animal," he commented as she approached. "Arabian bloodlines." "Andalusian," she corrected. "You know horses?" A half smile touched his mouth. "Know enough to appreciate that one." Quite an investment for a small ranch. The implication that she might have overreached irked her. "The Ashwood Ranch isn't small anymore, Mr. O'Malley, and my investments aren't your concern." He touched the brim of his hat. "No offense intended, madam, just making conversation." "Well, I have a nervous stallion to get home." She moved to climb onto the wagon seat. "Mind if I ride along?" "Sheriff says your place is on my way to where I'm staying." Sophia hesitated. Having this stranger accompany her home felt oddly intimate, but refusing would appear churlish or, worse, fearful. "Suit yourself, deputy, but I won't be slowing down for sightseeing." He swung easily into his saddle. "Wouldn't expect you to, Mrs. Ashwood." The journey to her ranch took them out of Redemption Creek and along the winding river road. Sophia kept her eyes forward, conscious of Nathan riding alongside, occasionally dropping back to check on the stallion. His silence was somehow more disconcerting than conversation would have been. "How long have you been a marshal's deputy?" she finally asked, breaking the quiet. "Going on 3 years." His answer was casual, but something in his tone suggested there was more to the story, and before that, he glanced at her, amusement in his eyes. "Curious about me, Mrs. Ashwood." "Curious about who the marshal sent to find my husband's killer," she corrected. Nathan nodded slowly. "Fair enough. I was an army scout, then did some bounty hunting. Tracking's what I'm good at. And killing." The question slipped out before she could stop it. His expression hardened. "When necessary." They rode in silence for another mile before he spoke again. "I read your telegram to the marshal." Sophia's hands tightened on the reins. "Then you know how I feel about Harris Keller." "I know you offered to pay for his capture, dead or alive." Nathan's voice remained neutral. "That's not typically how justice works." "Is that judgment I hear, deputy?" Observation. He guided his horse closer to the wagon. "Vengeance is a powerful motivator, but it rarely brings peace." Sophia laughed without humor. "Peace? Is that what you think I'm after?" She met his gaze directly. "Harris Keller stole my future when he shot my husband. All I want is for him to face the consequences. Even if those consequences mean another death." His gray eyes were unreadable. "Even if it means you become part of that death, Thomas deserves justice." "And what do you deserve, Mrs. Ashwood?" The softness of his question caught her off guard. Before she could answer, they crested a hill, and her ranch came into view, a sprawling property nestled in a green valley, with sturdy outbuildings and corrals surrounding a modest two-story house. Pride swelled in her chest at the sight of what she'd built from near ruin. "Home," she said simply. Nathan surveyed the property with an appreciative eye. "Impressive operation for a woman alone." "I'm not alone. I have good hands who respect hard work." She snapped the reins, urging the team forward. "And I don't need pity or protection, Deputy O'Malley." "Noted," was that admiration in his voice. "Though in my experience nobody really manages alone, Mrs. Ashwood, not for long." At the ranch, Jeremiah and the hands came out to help with the stallion. Sophia made brief introductions, explaining Nathan's presence with minimal detail. If the old foreman was curious, he had the good sense not to show it. "Will you be staying for supper, deputy?" Jeremiah asked as they led the stallion toward the stable. Before Nathan could answer, Sophia interjected, "I'm sure the deputy has business in town." Nathan's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Actually, the sheriff suggested I might find lodging out this way. Said the Miller place down the road takes boarders occasionally." "The Miller place?" Sophia's stomach dropped. "That's barely a mile from here. Convenient, isn't it?" Nathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Makes it easier to keep an eye on things while I'm searching for Keller." "Keep an eye on things," she repeated, "or on me. The marshal's concerned Keller might come looking for you." His voice lowered. "Your telegram made it clear you're offering a reward for his capture. That makes you a target." Sophia bristled. "I can protect myself." "I don't doubt it." He glanced at the rifle mounted on her wagon. "But Keller's desperate and dangerous. And I promised the marshal I'd ensure no harm came to his letter writer while I hunt for our mutual problem." The realization that this man would be her near neighbor, possibly for weeks, unsettled Sophia deeply. His presence was already stirring emotions she'd kept carefully buried, not just anger and grief, but a dangerous awareness that reminded her she was still young, still alive. "Do what you must, deputy," she said curtly. "But understand this, I won't be changing my routine or living in fear because Harris Keller is a coward." Nathan studied her for a long moment before touching the brim of his hat. "Wouldn't expect anything less, Mrs. Ashwood. Good day to you." Sophia watched him ride away, his straight-backed silhouette outlined against the setting sun. Only when he disappeared over the rise did she realize she was trembling with anger, she told herself. Nothing more. The next morning dawned clear and cool, typical for late September in Colorado territory. Sophia rose early, as was her habit, and dressed in her work clothes, a split riding skirt and sturdy blouse that scandalized the town ladies, but allowed her to move freely around the ranch. She pinned her dark hair in a simple knot and headed to the kitchen to start coffee before the hands arrived for breakfast. To her surprise, Jeremiah was already there, looking uncomfortable as he nursed a cup at her kitchen table. Across from him sat Nathan O'Malley, his hat on the table beside him. "Deputy." She stopped short in the doorway. "This is unexpected." Nathan stood. "Mrs. Ashwood, hope you don't mind the early call. Jeremiah was kind enough to offer coffee." Sophia shot her foreman a betrayed look. "Was he?" The old man cleared his throat. "Deputy was asking about strangers in the area, thought you'd want to hear. And what urgent news brings you to my kitchen at dawn?" She moved to pour herself coffee, keeping her back to Nathan. "Word is Keller was spotted near Silver Creek, about 40 miles south," Nathan said. "I'm heading that way this morning, but I wanted to warn you first." Sophia turned, cup in hand. "Silver Creek is in the opposite direction from Redemption Creek. If anything, that puts me in less danger." "Unless it's a false trail." Nathan leaned against the table, his posture casual but his eyes alert. "Keller's smart. He knows he's being hunted. And you think I'm his target? Why would he risk coming after me when he could simply disappear? Because you've put a price on his head." "Word spreads fast in territory towns." Nathan's voice softened. "And because you're the widow of the man he killed, some men like to tie up loose ends." A chill ran through Sophia despite her determined skepticism. "So what are you proposing?" "I'll ride to Silver Creek today, see if the rumors are true. In the meantime," he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small revolver, "I'd like you to carry this." The weapon was smaller than her rifle, designed to fit a lady's hand or pocket. Sophia stared at it. "I have firearms, deputy." "Not ones you can keep on your person at all times." He placed the revolver on the table. "It's loaded, 5 shots. Ever fired a handgun?" Despite her irritation at his presumption, Sophia nodded. "Thomas taught me." Something like approval flickered in Nathan's eyes. "Good man." "He was," she said softly. After a moment's hesitation, she reached for the gun, surprised by its comfortable weight. "Thank you, though I still think this is excessive." "Consider it professional caution." Nathan stood, retrieving his hat. "I should be back by tomorrow evening." "If I'm delayed, I'll send word." Jeremiah walked him to the door while Sophia remained at the table, turning the small revolver over in her hands. The foreman returned looking troubled. "Don't like this business, Miss Sophia," he said. "Maybe you should visit your sister in Denver until it's resolved." Sophia slipped the gun into her skirt pocket. "I'm not leaving the ranch, Jeremiah. Especially not now, with Midnight Commander just arrived. Your life's worth more than that horse, begging your pardon. My life is here." She gestured around her. "Everything I've rebuilt is here. I won't be chased away by fear." The old man sighed. "Your Thomas would want you safe. Thomas would expect me to stand my ground." She softened her tone. "I appreciate your concern, but I'll be fine. We'll take normal precautions and carry on." After breakfast, Sophia threw herself into ranch work with even more determination than usual. She supervised Midnight Commander's introduction to his new surroundings, worked with the yearlings in the training corral, and reviewed the books with her ranch manager. By late afternoon, she was saddle-sore and dusty, but satisfied with the day's progress. She was brushing down her mare when hoofbeats approached the stable. Instinctively, her hand went to the pocket where Nathan's revolver rested. "Mrs. Ashwood," a woman's voice called out. "Are you here?" Sophia relaxed, recognizing Harriet Miller, her nearest neighbor and apparently Nathan's landlady. She stepped out of the stall to greet the older woman. "Harriet, what brings you by?" Harriet dismounted from her placid mule with practiced ease despite her 60 years. "Thought I'd check on you, what with all this business about that escaped killer, and to thank me, for sending us such a fine boarder." Harriet's weathered face broke into a smile. "That Deputy O'Malley's the most polite gentleman we've had. Paid a month in advance and even fixed our leaking roof this morning before he rode out. He's certainly capable," Sophia conceded. "Handsome too," Harriet added with a wink. "If I were 30 years younger." "Harriet," Sophia couldn't help laughing, "you're incorrigible, just observant." The older woman studied Sophia's face. "He asked a lot of questions about you, you know." Sophia stiffened. What kind of questions? About your husband mostly, how long you were married, what kind of man Thomas was. Harriet patted Sophia's arm. Nothing improper, dear. Seemed genuinely concerned. He's just doing his job. Sophia turned back to her horse, suddenly needing the distraction. Maybe. Harriet's voice took on a thoughtful tone, though there's a sadness in that man's eyes that goes beyond duty. Reminds me of how you looked after Thomas passed, like someone carrying a burden they can't put down. Sophia said nothing, brushing her mare with long, steady strokes. Anyway, Harriet continued, I brought you some of my sourdough bread and to invite you for supper tomorrow. Thought you might like company, what with Deputy O'Malley away. That's kind, but no arguments, girl. 6 o'clock. Bring a pie if you're feeling charitable. My Henry's sweet tooth hasn't diminished with age. With that, Harriet handed over a cloth-wrapped loaf and remounted her mule. And Sophia, there's no shame in living while you're alive. Thomas would have wanted that for you. As Harriet rode away, Sophia leaned against the stable door, the bread warm against her chest. Was she that transparent? Could everyone see the conflict in her, the grief for Thomas warring with the unwelcome awareness that life continued, that her heart still beat, that she could still feel? And why did Nathan O'Malley's gray eyes keep appearing in her thoughts? That night, after a quiet supper with Jeremiah, Sophia sat on her porch watching darkness settle over the valley. The revolver rested in her lap, a solid reminder of potential danger. But her thoughts weren't on Harris Keller or the threat he posed. Instead, she found herself wondering where Nathan was tonight, if he was safe, if he had found any trace of Keller in Silver Creek. The concern surprised her. She barely knew the man, and what little she did know suggested he was as dangerous in his own way as the outlaw he hunted. Yet there had been something in his manner, in the way he had offered the gun without condescension, in how he had looked at her ranch with genuine appreciation rather than surprise that a woman could manage such an operation. He had seen her, not just the widow Ashwood or the unusual female rancher, but Sophia herself. It was a dangerous train of thought. She was still sitting there, lost in contemplation, when a rider appeared on the road leading to the ranch. In the fading light, she couldn't make out details, just the silhouette of a man on horseback moving steadily toward her home. Sophia gripped the revolver, her heart pounding. It was unlikely to be Keller, too bold, too direct, but caution overrode logic. She stood, stepping back into the shadows of the porch. "Who goes there?" she called when the rider was within earshot. "State your business." The horse slowed, and a familiar voice answered, "It's O'Malley, Mrs. Ashwood." Relief flooded her, followed immediately by confusion. "You're back early." Nathan guided his horse to the hitching post and dismounted stiffly. Even in the dim light, Sophia could see he was favoring his left side. "Trail went cold," he said, his voice tight. "Figured I'd come back, regroup." As he stepped onto the porch, the lamplight from inside the house illuminated him properly. Sophia gasped. A dark stain spread across his left shoulder and dried blood matted his temple. "You're hurt." She moved toward him instinctively. "It's nothing." He winced as she reached for his arm. "Took a fall when my horse spooked at her rattler." It was a lie, and they both knew it. The shoulder wound was clearly from a bullet, not a fall, but Sophia didn't press him, not yet. Instead, she guided him inside and called for Jeremiah. "Sit before you fall," she ordered, pointing to a chair at her kitchen table. "Jeremiah will help me get your coat off. Mrs. Ashwood, this isn't necessary, quiet." She was already gathering supplies: clean cloths, her medical kit, a bottle of whiskey. When Jeremiah appeared, sleepy-eyed but alert, she directed him to help Nathan remove his duster and shirt. The wound beneath was ugly but not life-threatening, a groove along his left shoulder that had bled freely, but wasn't deep enough to need stitching. Sophia cleaned it methodically, her hands steady despite her racing thoughts. "Want to tell me what really happened?" she asked as she worked. Nathan hissed as she applied alcohol to the wound. "Ran into some trouble, Keller," he hesitated. "Not exactly." Jeremiah, who had been heating water on the stove, brought over a steaming basin. "Was it them Blackburn brothers?" Heard they were riding with Keller before he got caught. Nathan's silence was answer enough. So they shot you. Sophia pressed a clean bandage to his shoulder. Why come here instead of to town? The doctor, too many questions in town, Nathan said. And I didn't want word getting back to Keller's friends that I'm close. Close to what? His gray eyes met hers. To finding him. The Blackburns were protecting him. They're camped about 20 miles south near the old Sullivan mine. Sophia's hands stilled on his shoulder, and Keller's with them? Was. He left this morning, according to what I overheard before they spotted me. Nathan grimaced as she secured the bandage. I'm hoping they think they killed me. Gives us an advantage. Us. Sophia stepped back, suddenly aware of how close she'd been standing, of the bare skin of his torso gleaming in the lamplight. This isn't my fight, deputy. It became your fight when you sent that telegram. His voice was gentle but unyielding. And it's definitely your fight if Keller decides to come after you. Jeremiah cleared his throat. Think I'll check on the horses, make sure the deputy's mount is settled. The old man's knowing look wasn't lost on Sophia as he retreated, closing the kitchen door behind him. Left alone with Nathan, Sophia busied herself cleaning up the medical supplies. You're welcome to rest here tonight, she said formally. The spare room upstairs, thank you. He stood carefully, testing his injured shoulder. But I should get back to the Millers. Don't want to compromise your reputation. The consideration surprised her. My reputation has survived worse than offering shelter to an injured lawman. Has it? His gaze was too perceptive. The way people talk in town, you'd think offering a smile to a man was cause for scandal. Sophia stiffened. Town gossip doesn't concern me. Doesn't it? Nathan stepped closer, his height forcing her to tilt her head to maintain eye contact. They called you a fool for dancing with that schoolteacher, for buying a new dress, for daring to live after your husband died. Heat rushed to her face. You've been asking questions. It's what I do. His voice softened. They're wrong, you know. Living isn't a betrayal. You didn't know Thomas. You don't know me. Sophia turned away, needing distance from his intensity. You're here to catch a killer, not counsel a widow on her grieving process. Maybe I'm doing both. The quiet statement hung between them, laden with implications neither was ready to acknowledge. Sophia took a steadying breath before facing him again. The spare room is the second door on the left. There's fresh water in the pitcher. She gestured to his bloodied shirt. I'll find you something clean to wear. Nathan accepted the dismissal with a slight nod. Thank you, Mrs. Ashwood. Sophia, she said impulsively, if you're staying under my roof, you might as well use my name. A smile touched his lips. Sophia then, and I'm Nathan. Good night, Nathan. She moved toward the door. We'll talk more in the morning. In her own room, Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, trembling slightly. The day's events had left her off balance. Having Nathan in her home, tending his wounds, hearing him speak her name, it all felt dangerously intimate. She glanced at Thomas's portrait on her dresser. What would you think of all this? She whispered. For the first time in 5 years, the question felt hollow, as if Thomas's opinion, so long the compass by which she'd navigated her life, was becoming less relevant to her present. The realization should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like drawing a full breath after years of constriction. Sleep was elusive that night, her mind racing between concerns about Harris Keller, memories of Thomas, and unbidden thoughts of the man sleeping down the hall. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were a confusing blend of past and present Thomas's smile morphing into Nathan's gray eyes, danger and desire intertwined. She woke at dawn, as usual, and dressed quickly in a simple blue skirt and white blouse. The house was quiet as she descended the stairs, but the scent of coffee told her someone was already awake. Nathan sat at the kitchen table, a cup before him, studying a map spread across the wooden surface. He'd found a clean shirt somewhere, probably borrowed from one of her hands that stretched tight across his shoulders. His dark hair was damp, as if he'd just washed, and the cut on his temple looked less angry in the morning light. He looked up as she entered, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. "Morning," he said. "Hope you don't mind. Coffee was calling my name." "Not at all." She moved to pour herself a cup, hyper-aware of his presence. "How's the shoulder?" "Sore, but serviceable." He folded the map carefully. "I need to head back out today." Sophia sat across from him. "To the Sullivan mine. After what happened yesterday, the Blackburns will have moved on, but they left tracks." His confidence was matter of fact, and those tracks will lead to Keller. "It's too dangerous. You should wait for reinforcements from the marshal's office." Nathan's eyebrows rose slightly. "Worried about me, Sophia?" The use of her first name, spoken in that deep drawl, sent an unwelcome shiver through her. "Worried about justice for Thomas," she corrected, though the words rang hollow even to her own ears. He studied her for a long moment. "I've been thinking about that. Your husband must have been quite a man to inspire such loyalty." He was. The familiar response came automatically, but for the first time, Sophia found herself elaborating. Thomas was kind, hardworking. He had dreams for this place, wanted to build something that would last, something we could pass on to our children someday. But no children came. No. Sophia stared into her coffee. "We'd only been married 2 years when he died. We thought we had time." Nathan nodded slowly. "Time's a luxury most of us take for granted until it's gone." Something in his tone made her look up. "You sound like you know that feeling." "I had a wife once." The admission seemed to surprise him as much as her. "Hannah, she died of fever 3 years ago. I'm sorry." Sophia's sympathy was genuine. "Were you married long?" "Just under a year." His eyes took on a distant quality, long enough to know what I lost. The shared grief created an unexpected connection between them, a bridge of understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. Sophia found herself wanting to reach across the table, to touch his hand in comfort or solidarity. Before she could act on the impulse, the kitchen door opened and Jeremiah entered, followed by 2 of the ranch hands. The old foreman stopped short at the sight of them sitting together. "Morning, Miss Sophia, deputy." He shot Nathan a speculative look. "Didn't realize you'd stayed the night." "The deputy was injured," Sophia said, rising too quickly. It seemed prudent. Jeremiah's expression remained neutral. "Course it did. Hank rode in from town with a message for you, Miss Sophia, from Mrs. Miller." Sophia accepted the folded paper with a sense of foreboding. Harriet's handwriting was cramped but legible. "Sophia, 2 men asking about the deputy at our place last night. Rough types. Henry sent them on their way but thought you should know. Still expect you for supper tonight." Harriet, she passed the note to Nathan, whose expression darkened as he read. "Time to move," he said, standing abruptly. "They're looking for me, which means they know I'm not dead." "And they know where you're staying," Sophia added. "They could come back to the Millers, or here." Nathan glanced at Jeremiah and the hands. "I need to leave." "Draw them away from the ranch." "No." The word came out more forcefully than Sophia intended. "That's exactly what they want, to isolate you." "Miss Sophia's right," Jeremiah interjected. "We've got 5 men here, all armed, better odds than you alone." Nathan looked torn between practicality and pride. "I won't put this ranch in danger." "This ranch is already in danger as long as Harris Keller is free," Sophia countered. "At least here we can prepare." After a tense moment, Nathan nodded. "All right, but we do this my way. I need men watching the approaches to the ranch, and everyone armed." For the next few hours, the ranch transformed into a small fortress. Sophia sent one hand to warn the Millers to be on alert and another to town with a message for Sheriff Miller. The remaining men positioned themselves strategically around the property while Sophia checked her rifle and the small revolver Nathan had given her. By mid-afternoon, the tension had stretched everyone's nerves thin. Nathan paced the front porch like a caged predator, scanning the horizon repeatedly. "You'll wear a hole in my boards," Sophia commented, joining him with 2 cups of coffee. He accepted the drink with a nod of thanks. "Don't like waiting." "Neither do I." She leaned against the porch railing. "But sometimes it's all you can do." They stood in companionable silence for several minutes before Nathan spoke again. Tell me something, Sophia. What will you do when this is over, when Keller's caught or killed? The question caught her off guard. I don't know. Continue building the ranch, I suppose. Alone, the word hung between them, heavy with implication. Sophia took a careful breath. The town already thinks I'm scandalous for dancing with the schoolteacher. Imagine the talk if I actually considered. She trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought. Considered what? Living, loving again? Nathan's voice was gentle but insistent. What would be so foolish about that? Sophia met his gaze directly. Have you, since Hannah? Pain flashed across his features. No. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't. He set his cup down and took a step closer to her. That doesn't mean you shouldn't. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken possibilities, with dangerous hope. Sophia found herself unable to look away from his face, from the quiet understanding in his eyes. The moment shattered at the sound of a horse approaching at a gallop. They both turned as Jeremiah rode into the yard, dust billowing behind him. Riders coming, the old man called. 3 of them, armed, about 2 miles out. Nathan was instantly alert, all traces of vulnerability gone. Get inside, he told Sophia. Bar the doors. This is my home, she protested. I'm not hiding. Sophia, I can shoot as well as any of your men, she insisted. Better than some. I won't cower while others defend what's mine. For a moment she thought he would argue. Instead, Nathan's mouth curved in a reluctant smile. Stubborn woman, he muttered. Fine. But you stay on the porch behind cover. Clear? Sophia nodded, retrieving her rifle from where it stood by the door. Together, they watched as Jeremiah organized the hands, positioning them around the house and barn. The approaching riders appeared first as dust clouds, then gradually took shape as 3 men moving at a steady pace down the road to the ranch. They made no attempt at stealth, which worried Sophia more than if they'd tried to sneak in. They're confident, she murmured. Nathan nodded grimly. They think they have us outnumbered, do they? Maybe. His hand brushed hers briefly. But they don't have you. The simple statement bolstered her courage as the riders drew nearer. From this distance, she could see they were rough-looking men, unshaven and trail-worn. One, a large man with a bushy beard, appeared to be leading. They stopped just beyond the yard, still mounted. The bearded man raised his hand in greeting as if this were a social call. Hello, the house, he called. Looking for Nathan O'Malley. Nathan stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Sophia. You found him, he called back. State your business, gentlemen. The bearded man grinned, revealing missing teeth. Here you've been asking about our friend Harris. Thought we might have a conversation about that. I'm a deputy marshal, Nathan replied evenly. Any information you have about Harris Keller should be shared with the law. That's so. The man spat to one side. Way I hear it, you're hunting him for the bounty money, same as us. Sophia tensed. Was that true? Was Nathan just another bounty hunter using a marshal's badge for convenience? I'm enforcing the law, Nathan said, his voice hard. Keller's a convicted murderer who escaped justice. Justice? The bearded man laughed. That what you call it when a man gets sentenced to hang over a fair fight? Fair fight? Sophia stepped forward, anger overriding caution. Harris Keller shot my husband in the back over a card game. There was nothing fair about it. The 3 men exchanged glances, and Sophia realized her mistake. They hadn't known who she was until now. Well, the bearded man drawled. Mrs. Ashwood herself. Harris mentioned you might be trouble. Nathan's hand moved subtly toward his gun. You've delivered your message. Now ride out while you still can. The bearded man's smile vanished. We're not leaving without you, O'Malley. Harris wants words. He'll get more than words when I find him. Your choice. The man nodded to his companions. Hard way it is. Everything happened at once. The 3 men reached for their guns as Nathan shoved Sophia behind a pillar and drew his own weapon. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions as Jeremiah and the hands opened fire from their positions. One of the riders jerked backward, a red bloom spreading across his chest before tumbling from his saddle. The bearded man wheeled his horse around, seeking cover behind the water trough as bullets kicked up dust around him. The third man's horse reared in panic, throwing its rider before bolting. Sophia leaned around the pillar, took careful aim with her rifle and fired. The bearded man cried out as her bullet grazed his arm. He returned fire wildly, splintering wood inches from her head. Nathan was a blur of controlled movement, firing with deadly precision. The dismounted rider fell with a shriek, clutching his leg. Only the bearded man remained a threat, pinned down but still dangerous. "It's over, Blackburn," Nathan called. "Throw out your weapon." Instead, Blackburn made a desperate dash for his horse, firing as he ran. Sophia watched in horror as Nathan stepped into the open, drawing the man's fire away from the house. A bullet struck the ground at Nathan's feet, but he stood firm, taking deliberate aim. 2 shots rang out simultaneously, Nathan's and Sophia's. Blackburn staggered, then collapsed face down in the dust. In the sudden silence, Sophia could hear her own ragged breathing. Nathan turned to her, his expression a mixture of surprise and admiration. "Good shot," he said simply. The aftermath was a blur of activity. The wounded rider was bound and locked in the storage shed until the sheriff could collect him. Blackburn and his dead companion were laid out in the barn, covered with burlap sacks. One of the hands rode to town to fetch the sheriff and the doctor for the injured ranch hand who'd taken a bullet in his arm. Through it all, Nathan stayed close to Sophia, his quiet presence steadying her as the reality of what had happened, of what she had done, settled in. She had killed a man. Even knowing it was necessary, even knowing he would have killed her without hesitation, the weight of the act pressed on her conscience. As darkness fell, the ranch quieted. Sheriff Miller had come and gone, taking the prisoners and bodies with him. The injured hand was resting comfortably after the doctor's visit. Jeremiah and the others maintained a watch, but the immediate danger seemed to have passed. Sophia sat alone in her parlor, a barely touched glass of whiskey in her hand, staring into the fire. She didn't look up when Nathan entered, though she was acutely aware of his presence. "Jeremiah's taking first watch," he said, settling into the chair opposite hers. "Everything's secure." "Is it?" She met his gaze finally. "Those men knew where to find you. They knew about me." "What's to stop Keller from sending more?" "Nothing," Nathan admitted, "but he's running out of friends, and tomorrow I'm going to find him." "How? We still don't know where he is." Nathan leaned forward. "The man in the shed talked before the sheriff took him. Keller's hiding at an abandoned homestead about 15 miles northwest, planning to cross into Wyoming territory." Sophia set her glass down carefully. "So you'll go after him, alone?" "It's my job, your job." She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Is that all this is to you?" "A bounty to collect," Nathan's expression hardened. "You think that's who I am? A man who'd use a badge to hunt for money?" "I don't know who you are," Sophia shot back. "You appear out of nowhere, involve yourself in my life, make me feel—" She stopped abruptly, realizing she'd said too much. "Make you feel what?" Nathan's voice had softened dangerously. Sophia stood, needing distance. "It doesn't matter. None of this does. Once Keller is dealt with, you'll move on to the next assignment, the next town, the next widow who needs saving." "Is that what you think I'm doing, saving you?" He rose as well, the firelight casting his features in sharp relief. "From where I stand, you've saved yourself pretty damn well, Sophia Ashwood. You rebuilt this ranch, made a life, even when the whole town thought you should just fade away into proper widowhood." His words struck too close to her carefully guarded heart. "Don't pretend to understand me. I understand more than you think." He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I understand what it's like to lose the future you planned, to wonder if you have the right to build another one." "Stop." Her voice wavered. "I understand what it's like to feel guilty for being alive, for still wanting things." Another step closer, for looking at someone and feeling possibility again. Sophia's back hit the mantelpiece. "Nathan, don't tell me I'm wrong." He was close enough now that she could feel the heat of him, could see the pulse beating in his throat. "Tell me you don't feel it too." She couldn't lie, not to him, not to herself, not anymore. "What does it matter what I feel? The town already thinks I'm a fool for smiling at another man." What would they say if I actually let them talk? Nathan's hand came up to touch her cheek, gentle despite the calluses on his palm. Let them call me a fool too. The simple declaration undid her. 5 years of grief and loneliness and rigid self-control crumbled as Nathan's mouth found hers in a kiss that was at once tender and desperate. Sophia's hands clutched at his shoulders, mindful of his wound yet unable to let go. He tasted of coffee and something indefinably male, his stubble rough against her skin as the kiss deepened. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Sophia kept her eyes closed, overwhelmed by sensation and emotion. "Sophia," Nathan whispered against her temple, "look at me." Slowly, she raised her gaze to his, expecting to see triumph or desire. Instead, his expression held wonder and a vulnerability that matched her own. "I didn't come here looking for this," he said softly, "but I'd be lying if I said I could walk away from it now. And what is this, exactly?" She asked, needing the clarity of words, a beginning if you want it. His thumb traced her lower lip. No promises beyond that, not until Keller's dealt with, but after. The possibility hung between them, fragile and terrifying and exhilarating. Sophia had spent 5 years defining herself by what she had lost. The idea of defining herself by what she might gain instead was almost too much to contemplate. "One day at a time," she said finally. "First, we deal with Keller." Nathan nodded, understanding her need for structure, for boundaries around this overwhelming new reality. "Together," he said. "We deal with him together." "No," Sophia stepped back, creating space between them. "I've spent 5 years living in Thomas's shadow. I won't step from that into yours." "This is my fight too, Nathan, my chance for closure." He studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right, but we do it smart, no unnecessary risks." "Agreed." She straightened her skirt, an automatic gesture that helped restore her composure. "We leave at dawn," he confirmed. Then with deliberate gentleness, he added, "Get some rest, Sophia. Tomorrow will be a long day." After he left, Sophia remained by the fire, her fingers touching her lips where Nathan's kiss still lingered. For the first time since Thomas died, she allowed herself to imagine a future different from the one she'd planned, a future built on choice rather than obligation, on possibility rather than memory. It was terrifying. It was liberating. And as she finally climbed the stairs to her bedroom, Sophia realized it was also, against all odds, hopeful. Morning arrived with a misty chill that promised to burn off into a warm autumn day. Sophia dressed with care in her riding clothes, pinning her hair securely beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The revolver Nathan had given her was tucked into a pocket, her rifle secured to her saddle. Nathan was already in the barn when she arrived, checking the cinch on his gray gelding. He looked up as she entered, his expression warming. "Morning," he said simply, "morning." The awkwardness she'd feared didn't materialize. Instead, there was a comfortable certainty between them, as if last night's revelations had cleared the air rather than complicated it. Jeremiah appeared with a bundle of provisions. "Packed you some food," he said, handing it to Sophia. "And extra ammunition." His weathered face was creased with concern. "Sure about this, Miss Sophia, I could ride with you. We need you here," she said firmly. "In case Keller has more friends than we know about." The old foreman nodded reluctantly. "Be careful then, both of you." As they rode out, the morning mist clung to the valley, wreathing the trees in gossamer. Sophia felt a strange sense of destiny, as if the path before her had been set long ago and she was only now recognizing it. "Tell me about the homestead where Keller's hiding," she said as they followed a game trail northwest. Nathan kept his eyes on the trail as he answered. "Belonged to a family named Pearson. They abandoned it last winter after the father died. It's isolated, hard to find unless you know where to look. And your prisoner told you exactly where it is." He was persuasive. Nathan's mouth quirked slightly. "That, and he's more afraid of Keller than prison." They rode in companionable silence for several miles, the terrain gradually becoming more rugged as they left the valley behind. Around midday, They stopped in a sheltered grove to rest the horses and eat some of Jeremiah's provisions. Seated on a fallen log sharing a canteen, Sophia found herself studying Nathan openly. In the dappled sunlight, the planes of his face seemed softer somehow, the permanent vigilance in his eyes tempered by something warmer when he looked at her. "What happened after your wife died?" she asked suddenly. "How did you become a deputy marshal?" Nathan took a long drink before answering. "I was angry. Took to drinking, then to hunting bounties because it gave me somewhere to put the rage." His voice was matter of fact. "Caught the attention of Marshal Harrington when I brought in the Carson brothers. He offered me a badge, said I might as well get paid properly for what I was already doing. And the anger, still there sometimes." He met her gaze directly, but not as consuming as it was. "Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it does teach you to carry them differently." Sophia nodded, understanding perfectly. "Does it bother you, what we might be starting with both of us carrying those wounds?" "No." His answer came without hesitation. "Hannah would have wanted me to live, same as I expect your Thomas would have wanted for you." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. "The way I see it, loving again doesn't dishonor what we had before, it honors it." The simple wisdom of his words settled something in Sophia's heart, a question she hadn't even realized she'd been asking. Before she could respond, Nathan's posture changed, his attention shifting to something beyond her shoulder. "Don't turn around," he said quietly. "Someone's watching us." Sophia stiffened, forcing herself to remain casual. "Keller, can't tell, movement in the trees about 100 yards back." Nathan stood, stretching as if simply restless from the ride. "Get ready to move. When I say go, get to your horse fast as you can." Her heart pounded as she gathered their supplies, movements deliberately unhurried. Nathan moved toward the horses, positioning himself so he could watch the trees behind them. "Now," he said sharply. Sophia sprinted for her mare, swinging into the saddle with practiced ease. Nathan was right behind her, drawing his gun as he mounted. A shot rang out, splintering bark inches from Sophia's head. "Ride," Nathan shouted, wheeling his gelding around to return fire. Sophia hesitated, unwilling to leave him exposed. Instead, she drew her rifle from its scabbard and took aim at the trees where the shot had originated. She fired twice in rapid succession, providing cover as Nathan backed his horse toward her. "I said ride," he growled. "Together," she reminded him, already turning her mare to follow the trail. They galloped side by side, branches whipping past as they crashed through the underbrush. More shots followed, but the dense forest made accuracy difficult for their pursuer. After several minutes of hard riding, Nathan led them off the trail and into a rocky stream bed where their tracks would be harder to follow. Only when they'd put considerable distance between themselves and the ambush site did Nathan signal to slow down. Both horses were lathered with exertion, sides heaving as they picked their way along the rocky stream. "You think that was Keller?" Sophia asked, scanning the forest around them. Nathan shook his head. "Keller's smarter. That was probably a lookout, someone watching the approaches to the homestead. Which means he knows we're coming. Maybe, or maybe our friend back there is working alone, hoping to impress the boss." Nathan checked his gun, then returned it to his holster. "Either way, we need a new approach." They found shelter in a small canyon as the afternoon waned, concealing themselves and the horses behind a tumble of boulders. Nathan scouted the surrounding area while Sophia kept watch, the small revolver ready in her hand. When he returned, his expression was grim. "Found tracks. 2 men heading toward the homestead. Warning Keller, most likely." Nathan settled beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. "Changes our plan, we'll have to wait until dark." As the sun sank toward the horizon, Sophia found herself wrestling with unexpected emotions. The prospect of confronting the man who'd killed Thomas should have filled her with righteous anger, with grim determination. Instead, she felt a strange sense of closure approaching, as if a door long stuck ajar was finally about to shut. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked softly, his eyes reflecting the fading light. I'm thinking that for 5 years I've defined myself by Thomas's death, by being his widow, by continuing his dream. She met Nathan's gaze steadily. I'm wondering who I'll be when this is over. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Whoever you want to be, that's the thing about endings, they make room for beginnings. Darkness settled around them like a blanket, bringing with it a chill that had Sophia moving closer to Nathan's warmth. They sat in companionable silence, watching as stars appeared one by one in the clear mountain sky. We should go, Nathan said finally, rising to check his weapons. The homestead's about 2 miles north. We'll leave the horses here and approach on foot. Sophia nodded, gathering her courage along with her rifle. The moment she'd both dreaded and yearned for was approaching. Soon, she would face the man whose actions had altered the course of her life. The prospect was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. They moved through the night like shadows, Nathan leading with the sure-footedness of a man accustomed to tracking in darkness. Sophia followed closely, grateful for the nearly full moon that illuminated their path through the pine forest. The Pearson homestead appeared first as a darker shape against the night sky, then gradually took form as a ramshackle cabin with a partially collapsed barn beside it. A faint glow from within suggested occupants, and a single horse was tethered outside. Only one mount, Sophia whispered. Could Keller be alone? Nathan shook his head. The lookouts might have horses concealed nearby, we assume nothing. They circled the property cautiously, staying within the tree line. A man sat on the cabin's front steps, smoking a cigarette, rifle across his knees. Another shape moved behind a grimy window, passing back and forth in front of the light. 2 that we can see, Nathan murmured. The one on the steps isn't Keller. How do you know? Build's wrong. Keller's taller, broader in the shoulders. Nathan scanned the surrounding area. No sign of the men who ambushed us earlier. What's the plan? Nathan considered for a moment. I'll circle around to the back. There's likely a rear door or window. When I'm in position, I'll create a distraction. You stay here, keep your rifle on the man at the front. If Keller makes a run for it, take him alive if possible. I want him to face a proper hanging. Sophia's hands tightened on her rifle. Be careful. His eyes softened as he looked at her. Always am. Impulsively, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers. For luck, he whispered, then melted into the shadows. Alone, Sophia steadied her breathing, focusing on the sentry at the cabin door. The minutes stretched endlessly as she waited for Nathan's signal. She could see the man, clearly now young, maybe 20, nervously scanning the darkness between puffs on his cigarette. A sudden crash from behind the cabin shattered the silence. The sentry jumped to his feet, gun raised as the cabin door burst open. A tall figure appeared in the doorway, unmistakably Harris Keller from the wanted posters Sophia had memorized. He shouted something to the younger man, gesturing frantically toward the trees. Gunfire erupted from the rear of the cabin. The sentry sprinted in that direction while Keller ducked back inside. Moments later, he reappeared with a saddlebag, making for the tethered horse. Sophia stepped out of the trees, rifle raised. Harris Keller, he froze, then slowly turned to face her. Recognition dawned in his weather-beaten face. Mrs. Ashwood, he said, his voice a gravelly rasp. Should have known you'd be trouble. Put the bag down and your hands up, Sophia commanded, proud of her steady voice despite the hammering of her heart. Keller smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. Now why would I do that? You're just a woman with a gun you probably don't know how to use. I know enough. Sophia took careful aim. I know you murdered my husband, shot him in the back over a card game. Your husband was a cheat, Keller spat, had an ace up his sleeve. You're lying. But a sliver of doubt pierced her certainty. Thomas had loved cards, perhaps too much. Am I? Keller took a step toward her. Ask yourself why a man with a pretty wife and a promising ranch would risk everything on a hand of cards. Thomas Ashwood had a problem, madam. One that would have cost you everything eventually. Stop talking and put your hands up, Sophia ordered, pushing aside his poisonous words. Instead, Keller's hand darted toward his holster. Sophia fired instinctively, her bullet grazing his arm. He howled in pain but managed to draw his pistol, returning fire wildly. Sophia dove for cover behind a water barrel as bullets splintered the wood around her. She heard hoofbeats as Keller made for his horse, then more gunshots from the direction Nathan had gone. Peering around the barrel, she saw Keller struggling to mount his panicking horse, his wounded arm hampering his efforts. Without conscious thought, Sophia raised her rifle and fired again. The outlaw jerked, then tumbled to the ground with a cry of pain. Sophia approached cautiously, rifle trained on Keller's prone form. Blood spread across his thigh where her bullet had found its mark. He glared up at her, hatred distorting his features. "Finish it," he snarled, "if you've got the stomach for it." For 5 years, Sophia had imagined this moment facing her husband's killer, exacting justice. She'd pictured satisfaction, closure, perhaps even peace. Instead, looking down at the wounded man, she felt nothing but a weary sense of completion, as if the final page of a difficult book had been turned. "No," she said quietly, "you'll hang properly, pay for what you did to Thomas." "Your precious Thomas," Keller sneered. "The man was my husband," Sophia interrupted. "And whatever his faults, he didn't deserve to die by your hand." She kept her rifle steady. "But neither do you deserve to die by mine." More gunfire sounded from behind the cabin, followed by a shout of pain that made Sophia's blood run cold. "Nathan, stay where you are," she warned Keller, before backing carefully toward the cabin, unwilling to turn her back on the wounded outlaw. She'd nearly reached the corner of the building when Nathan appeared, dragging the young sentry whose arm was bent at an unnatural angle. "Nathan." Relief flooded her at the sight of him unharmed. "Got this one," he said, shoving the younger man to the ground. Ware's his eyes widened as he spotted Keller by the horse. "You got him?" "Leg wound," Sophia confirmed. "He won't be running anywhere." Nathan secured the young man with a length of rope before approaching Keller. The outlaw glared up at him, clutching his bleeding leg. "Another bounty hunter," Keller growled. "Deputy Marshal," Nathan corrected, binding the man's hands despite his protests of pain. "You're under arrest for the murder of Thomas Ashwood, escape from custody, and probably a dozen other charges I haven't got time to list." As Nathan secured Keller, Sophia found herself watching with a strange detachment, as if observing a scene from someone else's life. The man who had haunted her thoughts for 5 years, whose actions had shaped the course of her existence, seemed smaller somehow, diminished by his capture and by the passage of time. "You all right?" Nathan asked softly, coming to stand beside her. Sophia nodded slowly. "I thought I'd feel different, more vindicated. Justice isn't as satisfying as vengeance seems to promise." He touched her shoulder gently. "But it lasts longer." Dawn was breaking by the time they'd secured both prisoners on horses and begun the journey back toward town. Keller's wound had been roughly bandaged, enough to keep him from bleeding out before they could deliver him to the proper authorities. He rode in sullen silence, occasionally casting venomous glances at Sophia. During a brief rest to water the horses, he finally spoke directly to her. "Your husband begged, before I shot him, begged like a dog." Sophia stiffened, but Nathan's hand on her arm steadied her. "He's trying to get to you," he murmured. "Don't let him." "I know what Thomas was," she replied, loudly enough for Keller to hear. "A good man who made mistakes. But he died braver than you'll live, Mr. Keller." The outlaw spat in the dust but fell silent. As they approached Redemption Creek later that day, word of their coming spread quickly. By the time they reached the main street, a crowd had gathered, watching in stunned silence as Sophia Ashwood and Nathan O'Malley brought in Harris Keller and his young accomplice. Sheriff Miller met them outside the jailhouse, his expression a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. "Never thought I'd see the day," he muttered as deputies took charge of the prisoners. "Mrs. Ashwood, are you hurt?" "No, Sheriff, just tired." Sophia dismounted stiffly, her body aching from the long ride. Abigail Peterson pushed through the crowd, her pinched face alight with disapproval. Sophia Ashwood, have you no sense of propriety? Gallivanting around the countryside with a strange man dressed like that. Before Sophia could respond, Nathan stepped forward. Mrs. Ashwood just helped capture a dangerous fugitive, madam. Show some respect. Respect. Abigail's voice rose shrilly. She's making a spectacle of herself, first dancing with the schoolteacher, now this unseemly adventure. What would Thomas say? Something snapped inside Sophia, a final thread connecting her to the woman she'd been before the proper widow, the keeper of Thomas's memory, the woman who lived her life according to others' expectations. Thomas is dead, Abigail, she said clearly, her voice carrying to the hushed crowd. Dead for 5 years, and while I'll always honor his memory, I'm still alive. She stepped closer to Nathan, drawing strength from his presence. If that makes me a fool in your eyes, so be it. Nathan's hand found hers, fingers intertwining publicly. Then they can call me one too, he said, his voice carrying easily in the stunned silence. Because any man who'd judge a woman for choosing life over a ghost is the real fool. A murmur ran through the crowd. Sophia was conscious of staring eyes, of whispers behind raised hands. But for the first time in years, the weight of judgment slid off her shoulders like a discarded cloak. Sheriff, Nathan turned to the lawman, I'll need to send a telegram to Marshal Harrington about Keller's capture, and Mrs. Ashwood needs rest. We've had a long few days. Miller nodded, still looking somewhat dazed by the turn of events. Of course, use my office for the telegram, and, good work, both of you. As they moved toward the sheriff's office, the crowd parted reluctantly. Sophia heard snippets of conversation, some disapproving, others admiring, most simply curious. She kept her head high, Nathan's hand warm in hers. Inside the privacy of Miller's office, Sophia finally allowed herself to sag against the desk, the emotional and physical toll of the past days catching up with her. It's over, she said softly. Really over. Nathan knelt before her, taking both her hands in his. The hard part is. What comes next is up to you. Up to us, she corrected gently, if you meant what you said out there. His smile was slow and sure, every word. I'm not much for public declarations as a rule, but some things need saying in the light of day. Sophia's heart swelled with a hope she'd thought long dead. They'll talk about us. The whole town will be scandalized. Let them talk, Nathan said again, rising to his feet and drawing her with him. Let them call us fools for daring to find something worth living for. And when the marshal sends you to your next assignment, what then? Nathan's expression grew serious. That depends on what you want, Sophia. I've been a wanderer since Hannah died. Haven't had a real home, haven't wanted one. His hands tightened on hers. Until now. The implication of his words hung between them, breathtaking in its simplicity and its enormity. Are you saying you'd stay here in Redemption Creek? I'm saying I'd go wherever you are, or stay if that's what you want. His voice roughened. I'm saying I love you, Sophia Ashwood. Didn't expect to, didn't go looking for it, but there it is. Tears filled Sophia's eyes, not of grief or regret, but of a joy so unexpected and complete that it overflowed the careful boundaries she'd built around her heart. I love you too, she whispered. God help me, I do. Their kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with the promise of all they could be to each other, not replacements for what they'd lost, but something new and precious built on the foundations of their past. When they finally separated, Sophia smiled through her tears. Take me home, Nathan. We have a future to build. 1 year later, the roses in Sophia's garden bloomed with reckless abandon, their scent filling the evening air as guests gathered for the celebration. Lanterns hung from the porch eaves, casting a warm glow over the tables set up in the yard of what was now the O'Malley Ranch. Sophia smoothed the skirt of her blue silk dress, decidedly not widow's black, as she surveyed the scene with quiet satisfaction. Neighbors and friends mingled, glasses raised in toasts, children darted between tables in spirited games. Even Abigail Peterson had accepted an invitation, though she sat somewhat stiffly beside her husband, her disapproval muted by time and the undeniable evidence of Sophia's happiness. "Beautiful evening," Jeremiah commented, joining her on the porch. The old foreman had blossomed under the ranch's expansion, mentoring younger hands with gruff affection. "Who'd have thought we'd be hosting half the county a year ago?" "Not me," Sophia admitted with a laugh. "Though I might have hoped." Her gaze sought and found Nathan across the yard, deep in conversation with Sheriff Miller. In the year since Harris Keller's capture and subsequent hanging, Nathan had officially resigned his deputy marshal position and taken on the management of the ranch beside Sophia. The transition hadn't been seamless. They were both too independent, too accustomed to making their own decisions, but the partnership they'd forged was stronger for the occasional storms. As if feeling her gaze, Nathan looked up and smiled, excusing himself to make his way to her side. He moved with the same easy confidence she'd noticed that first day on the train platform, but there was a settled quality to him now, a man who had found his place in the world. "Mrs. O'Malley," he greeted her, the name still new enough to bring a flush of pleasure to her cheeks. Their wedding 3 months earlier had been a small affair, just close friends and the minister, but the celebration tonight was their gift to the community that had gradually accepted their unconventional path. "Mr. O'Malley." She accepted the kiss he placed on her cheek. "Sheriff Miller looks pleased with himself." He should be. "Just got word that the last of the Blackburn gang was captured in Arizona." Nathan's arm slipped around her waist. "Seems our adventure last year did more than just bring Keller to justice. Broke up one of the worst outlaw gangs in the territory. Our adventure," she repeated, savoring the words. "The first of many, I hope. Count on it." His gray eyes, warm with love, held a promise of all the adventures still to come, though I'm equally fond of our quieter moments. Jeremiah cleared his throat pointedly. "Think I'll check on those stakes," he muttered, making a tactical retreat as Nathan pulled Sophia closer. "Have I told you today how beautiful you are?" Nathan murmured against her hair, "or how proud I am to be your husband?" "You might have mentioned it once or twice." Sophia leaned into his embrace, still marveling at how perfectly they fit together. "But I don't mind hearing it again." From the yard came the sound of laughter as one of the ranch hands began playing a fiddle, the lively tune drawing couples toward a cleared space for dancing. Nathan stepped back, extending his hand with a formal bow. "May I have this dance, Mrs. O'Malley?" Sophia placed her hand in his, remembering another dance that had sparked such disapproval. "You realize everyone will talk," she teased. "Let them." Nathan led her down the steps and into the circle of dancers. "They can call us fools all they want." As they joined the other couples, Sophia caught sight of Harriet Miller beaming approvingly from her seat. Beside her, even Abigail Peterson was tapping her foot to the music, her usual pinched expression softening as she watched Sophia and Nathan move together. "I think they're coming around," Sophia observed as Nathan spun her skillfully. Most people do, given time. His hand was warm and sure against her back. "The rest don't matter." The music shifted to a slower tune and Nathan drew her closer. Around them, other couples followed suit, but Sophia was aware only of her husband, of the steady beat of his heart against hers, of the life they were building together. "Any regrets?" he asked softly, his breath warm against her ear. Sophia thought of Thomas, of the young bride she'd been, of the widow she'd become, of all the steps that had led her here to this moment, to this man. "Not one," she answered truthfully. "Every choice, every struggle led me to you." Nathan's kiss, there under the stars with the whole town watching, was his answer and affirmation of the love that had bloomed between them, unexpected and unstoppable as the roses in Sophia's garden. "They called me a fool," she whispered against his lips. "The best kind of fool there is." Nathan's smile held all the promise of their future together. "Then let them call me one too."